Well, it's yet another armchair reflection as we enter another week of lockdown. It seems such a long time in some ways we've been in this position, and yet we're all finding new ways of communicating and keeping in touch. It was amazing that we could still celebrate Easter last week. It was just different to normal, but good to celebrate Easter with others both locally and around the country. And it helps us, I think, to imagine how Jesus' friends, his disciples, would have felt after Jesus died and then rose again those 2,000 years ago. The Bible tells us that the disciples were delighted when they heard that Jesus had come back from the dead after their terrible grief at his crucifixion. And yet they were still frightened about their own lives. They knew too that they were at risk of being put to death by the same authorities that had had Jesus crucified. John's Gospel tells us they spent much time in locked rooms, hiding for fear of the Jews, a sort of self-inflicted lockdown. And yet when the resurrected Jesus visited them for the first time, the first thing he did was to offer them peace and then forgiveness. My guess is that when seeing someone who you had seen crucified, dead and buried, and especially if they turned up suddenly in a locked room, you wouldn't feel that peaceful. But nevertheless, they were thrilled to see him. They must also have wondered what would happen next, because after a visit he disappeared again. Over the following few weeks, Jesus' disciples would see Jesus again, as did hundreds of others, but they were still uncertain over the future and still worried what would happen to them. We too are living in uncertainty and wondering what will happen in the future. We too, like those disciples of Jesus, are in lockdown and able to live in any sort of normality. Meanwhile, we too see glimpses of the love of Jesus as we see the coming together of community, as we see the care of our nurses, doctors and care workers and other key workers, and as we celebrate the love and determination of people like Captain Tom, walking to raise money for the NHS. Last time I looked, he'd raised over £21 million. And of course, his new single, made remotely with Michael Ball and digitally arranged choir from the NHS, is heading for the top of the UK singles charts. Totally amazing, and a sign of better things to come, and a sign of the community that binds us across the country. Going back to the disciples, they sat in lockdown and fear. They had no way of knowing the huge changes for the better that were to come. And of course they came after Pentecost, only 40 days after Jesus' death. Here, followers of Jesus would spring a new Christian faith and church into life, and the love and hope and care of Jesus would become the new way of life for the world. Likewise, in this country, in a recent poll, over 54% of people said they want their lives to be different after this emergency, and hope that the whole country changes too. Over 40% of people are encouraged by seeing a greater sense of community, and 39% are more in touch with their friends and family, aided by the technology that so many people now have. We have no idea what new life after lockdown will look like, but we all have a part to play in a new and brighter life. We may feel that we can't all be a Captain Tom and do something amazing, but we can all play our part in making a better society for the future, just as Jesus' disciples did 2,000 years ago. We can all, as Mother Teresa of Calcutta famously said, do small things with great love. We can all be part of a change in the future of our own lives, our country and the world, just as the disciples were to change the world forever in ways they could never ever have imagined. We can all be carriers of love and hope and care for the future to help create a better world, a world focused on caring for people and for creation. While the disciples were locked down, they stayed faithful, they stayed together, they prayed together. We too can stay faithful, we too can stay together even when physically apart, and we too can pray for the world during this terrible time and have confidence that better days are to come. So in the words of St. Paul, may the God of hope fill you with joy and peace as you have trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.